lots of black smoke coming out the exhaust pipe, so I suspected the EGR valve. I've just taken the EGR valve off. That lives down there. Bolts onto this flange here, and there's 3 more bolts down there, and this is where the problem is. That valve is stuck wide open. As the valve stem comes through the body here where my thumb is, and this motor opens the valve. It relies on a spring to close it, and it hasn't closed. So exhaust fumes are being diverted from the exhaust manifold round into the inlet manifold. There's a pipe that links the EGR valve across the top here into the inlet manifold. That's the pipe. Just taken this plastic cover off that fits on the back of the valve, and you can see the cam that operates the valve. This is the cam, and there's the valve open, and there's a spring under there which should be closing it. So if I just force it a little bit, so it sticks. That should close on its own. It's a bit of a poor design really. This cam is, the spring is trying to turn the cam anti-clockwise, and as well as trying to drag the valve stem back down to the body of the valve, the valve stem is being pushed sideways to the left, and that's what's causing it to stick. So the more pressure you put on this cam trying to turn it to the left, the more force there is on that valve stem pushing it sideways. So if I just ease that valve stem to the right a bit, it comes down. Just push it to the right a bit. That's where the problem is. I filled this housing here with WD-40, and I'm flushing the valve stem. So that's free now. So there's no grease on there. I just cleaned it, flushed it out with WD-40, it's still wet a bit with WD-40. The valve stem actually slides inside of a bronze or brass bush which goes down through the aluminium housing there. So it's flushed out all the way through. I've also cleaned the valve itself and the back of the valve seat. So that's making a perfect seal. This valve is fitted that way up at the back of the engine. So I've cleaned it out with WD-40, I've flushed it out and it seems to be free now. The biggest job was getting the valve off. This screw here, you don't have to take it all the way out, you only have to slacken it and then it slides out of a slot. But because it's underneath and you can't see it, you can only feel it with your fingertips, it was difficult to get the Allen key into the end of it. So it took about an hour and a half to get that loose because you couldn't see it. So I'm going to replace that with a hexagon head bolt and then I should be able to get a ring spanner on it. So seems to be free now. There's a plastic cover that just clips on there and covers this up. That was all full of soot. This is the little plastic cover that covers the cam mechanism. That cover just clips down onto there, and this is what it's like inside. That's all soot from exhaust fumes. All that has leaked up past the valve stem. So I'll clean that out, clip it back together. That's the cover clipped on. That's where the EGR valve lives, down behind the engine there. Now, I'm just going to clean those ports out a bit there and put a vacuum cleaner on it, because I can see quite a bit of soot inside those small, well, they're actually a series of tubes. I've got that heat exchanger cleaned up now. I've pushed a rod inside of each one of those ports. I actually used a long parallel chainsaw file just to make sure each port was clean. Using a vacuum cleaner at the same time just to make sure all the bits got sucked out. You don't want any large lumps of soot floating about there, otherwise they'll get caught in the catalytic converter in the exhaust pipe. This slot here, you can see, that's where that bolt on the underside of the EGR valve slots into. So it slots into that, the bolt slots into that slot there, and then you have to tighten it up. and with it having a head on it before for an Allen key, that was where it was difficult to try and get the Allen key in, because when the valve is here you're having to reach right on the back of it, and you've got these sort of things in the way. So now I think I'll be able to just get a ring spanner under there above this pipe, and that should make it easier. I was just about to put the EGR valve back on, and I spotted another little problem. There's actually a bolt missing where the end of the screwdriver is, where that bracket is. There should be a bolt through there which should be bolting that plastic lug there to this aluminium lug. The bolt should go through that hole there, and that was actually missing. That bracket, that plastic bracket, actually supports this air intake pipe. So this big air intake pipe, which goes round the back, this is it here. Got that bolt in now, that one. Got the valve back on. This is where you have to reach with a spanner under here to get to that bottom bolt. That was easy to do. Now I've got to put this this pipe on, and that bolts onto the that flange there, and goes into the inlet manifold there. To prove the fault was in the EGR valve, before taking it off, I actually made a blanking plate, and I slackened the two bolts that were holding the pipe onto that flange, and I slipped that blanking plate between the pipe and the flange so that the port was blocked off, even if the valve was stuck open. And with that plate, that blanking plate in place, it got rid of the fault. So just got to screw this pipe back into place, and there's also a stabilising bar which fits across the engine bay here. Got that pipe on. Got the engine bay stabiliser bar. There's a plastic engine cover to clip on there, and then that's the job finished. This is something I've learnt to do when you're working in awkward places with a spanner. If you drop your spanner down the back there, it's impossible to see where it is, so if you tie it onto a piece of string, it's easy to fish it out again. everything seems okay.